As an early stage founder, I have made a lot of mistakes. But what's the most painful is when you conceptualize something, take it into a room, and no one applauds you. Far worse is when you have put something out there in the form of a website, in the form of a product, and you don't get the response you were expecting. In your head, the idea is worth billions, and in many cases, it actually is. However, this idea needs to be communicated the right way. Today with us, we have another positioning expert. Today with us, we have Anthony Pierri. Anthony is a partner at Fletch PMM, which helps startups position the product the way they should. Anthony was previously the director of marketing at Headway and has spent the majority of his career working with church communities in various capacities. Welcome to the show, Anthony. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
Pleasure is mine. I have been looking forward to doing these sessions for a while. I know we were going on and off about scheduling this for a while. Finally, glad to be doing it. I have a bunch of questions. To a large extent, this is just going to be me actually sort of like satisfying my curiosities out there in terms of what messaging is. And it's hyper relevant. Like I am building a company, I am struggling through a lot of different aspects of my messaging. And I have these founder folks that I keep talking to. And I know for a matter of fact that they're also going to resonate with it a lot. So super excited for it. I'm going to dive straight into it. Anthony, when someone comes and says, hey, we are looking at this product and it's positioned brilliantly, or for that matter, this product has an amazing marketing team, this startup has absolutely nailed how they're going about publicizing what they do. In general, it becomes very clear what they mean when you are looking at bigger established brands. But for anyone who's starting out, who is maybe in an early stage, it's very confusing as to what's what is marketing, what is positioning, what is branding for that matter, where is it overlapping, how do you define these terms, do you even need two teams for that matter? And interestingly, when most people talk about what is what, or for that matter, even internally in our company, when we have discussed good examples of positioning or marketing, the names that come are names like Nikes of the world, the Apples of the world, but it doesn't still match very clearly with what an early stage company, an early stage founder in my capacity or someone like me should be doing. Can you help us shed some light on like good distinct examples of marketing and branding in smaller companies? How do you look at the whole space?
Yeah, so in general, we see a delineation between product marketing and brand marketing, and these loosely
Mm-hmm.
follow the course of a company's growth cycle. In the early stage, whether you're doing demand generation, some higher up the funnel thing to get people excited about your company, ideally, you're actually getting them excited about the product. You're saying, we've created this product that can do these specific things, that solve these specific problems, and you should want to get it, right? You should try to buy it and adopt our software or whatever it might be. So that's product marketing, and you're generating demand for the product. As the company gets larger and you start layering on more products, eventually you pivot to more brand marketing, where you're generating demand for the company and the brand itself. So you can think of a Nike. Nike can run essentially a billboard on the side of a highway that just has the logo and says, just do it. And what they're doing is they're creating awareness to remind you, hey, we exist and you should, ideally come and buy our products. But it's more about generating awareness and putting people, like getting in the minds of customers related to the brand itself. So the big mistake that we see startups do is they copy the large company strategy, which is a primarily brand marketing strategy, before anyone has cared about the product. The reason Nike can do brand marketing is because they've been around for 50, 60, maybe even 70 years now. And they've really won people over on the products to the point where you think Nike and you think quality, you think athleticism, you think about all the famous athletes who have used these shoes and shirts and all the different products and stuff. And so they've become something bigger than a product. But in the early days, when you're just a startup, you have none of that name recognition. And so the biggest area we see this is like people on LinkedIn, tons and tons of companies running ads, doing thought leadership, content to raise awareness about the company rather than raise awareness about the product. And the biggest success story is they don't make this mistake. ChatGPT, fastest growing product in history, I think, other than maybe the COVID vaccine. I think that was more rolled out to more countries faster. But I think ChatGPT was the fastest software. And what was all the marketing about? It was, look at what you can ask this chatbot. It wasn't, here's what OpenAI stands for as a company. It was, download this chatbot and start typing in it and check out what you can do. So that's in general how we think about the delineation. And we're like, yeah, you can have a strong brand, but in the early days, it should just be supporting. It's a supporting role, where later it might take center stage as you have a suite of products for all sorts of different customers. You might actually be wanting to lead more with the brand message. But most companies don't even ever get to that stage where they're doing multiple billions in revenue where it makes sense. Because even up to 50 million, you probably still want to be talking about the product and getting people excited to buy the products rather than just, hey, well, this is the brand name and you should know that this brand exists.
Hey everyone, welcome to Just Crunch It. Here we talk about all things data, analytics, business, AI, and everything in between. Some very hard questions, some very honest answers. This is for you if you are getting started, or for that matter, if you are an expert. This is for you even if you're feeling left out in today's world of ever evolving technology landscape, advancements in AI. Now that you're talking about it, in my head, I kind of struggle like sort of relating with it. And that's maybe partly because I spend a lot of time with early stage founders. And there's a reason why they don't spend as much time focusing on product messaging. And part of it is also the lack of awareness in terms of what bad positioning can do for you. But there's also like a lot of moving pieces. Sometimes when the product is shaping up, you maybe just want to have like a loosely defined messaging. At some point in time, you have certain signals, but you don't have like a concrete supporting evidence, a concrete like logic to why you should stick to one messaging. How do you think founders should approach that? Because startups, for all it's worth, they're always going to be about a lot of random work here and there, and messaging will always take a backseat. So that's there are two like sides of the question. One is how do you sort of like tell to a startup founder the importance of messaging for all it's worth when there's time and like the bandwidth is being demanded from all sides and all directions. But second is in general, how should someone just navigate this when they're pre-PMF to when they're just seeing PMF to let's say when they're scaling up. You talked about like a 50 million milestone and so on. So yeah, those two questions broadly.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is that founders, what they don't realize that they're doing is when founders are still taking every sales call personally, they're repositioning and doing messaging for every single customer. So they're doing one-to-one positioning, which is the difference between sales and marketing. Marketing is one-to-many, sales is one-to-one. So in a one-to-one sales call, I can position a product specifically for you. I can say, here's the key use case for you in your company specifically, and here's exactly the value proposition for you because I've done discovery questions, I've asked about the problems here, and then I'm repositioning. So the whole game that founders should be trying to play to find product market fit is they're looking for repeatability. If you position and close 10 different customers in 10 different segments for 10 different reasons, you don't have product market fit. You might have product customers fit or something, right? And different customers. Like all you've done is the same thing as like if you're a freelancer and you're like, I don't have a specialty, I'm just going to go out and see if I can get work. And someone hires you for copywriting, someone hires you to make a design on the website, someone hires you to, make a video for them, someone hires you to do the back office accounting. If you got all these different things that you're doing, that freelancer might be making money, but they haven't found product market fit or service market fit. They're just delivering a bunch of different solutions for a bunch of different people. So founders, what they need to be trying to do is looking for repeatability. And for us, to test a segment for repeatability is a complicated and time consuming and resource intensive task. To say, let's say we want to land healthcare companies, and we're like, our product can be used in healthcare and financial services, and it's more horizontal. It has all this potential. It's a giant moonshot. It's going to be worth billions of dollars. Great. But say you're like, I just want to test for repeatability, and you're thinking maybe I'm going to try with healthcare. To actually land 10 healthcare companies for the same reason, for the same use case, with the same outcome, is going to require a ton of work, not just on the messaging and positioning side, but also on the product side, the delivery side, the support side. And a founder can't really figure out is this going to be the product market fit that I'm going to launch my company out of until they've actually spent some time testing that market and hearing what that market would need and seeing if they can build those solutions or they need to partner with other people to actually deliver the whole solution to them. And so for us, we're like, founders want to keep their options open as long as possible. And I think there's some smart, there's some wisdom to that. But ultimately, if a company wants to get out of the garage and into the main street success, they actually have to make the jump to finding a repeatable segment. And so people are scared about making this decision because it's a high risk, low data decision. And so I was recently rereading the book Crossing the Chasm, which talks a lot about this. And the author, he's like, you just have to realize that's reality. This decision is going to be super risky and you're going to have very little data. And you just have to accept that that's the reality and make the plunge and really charge at it. And the old school lean startup where you do build, measure, learn, and then this was the wrong market, we need to pivot. All that stuff is still true. We just forgot and pretended it's not. And we're like, we can serve everyone all at once. That was never possible in the old days. It's still never possible today. So I don't even know if I answered your questions or not, but in general, that's how we think about founders in the early stage with messaging and all those pieces.
Yeah, no, and I'm relating to it in bits and pieces. And what's extremely important, or at least a big takeaway for me here, is that first bit of confusion comes when in general you just don't know what you're going to do. So you know that, okay, hey, we're going to work with AI and we're going to work with this, like we're going to work in healthcare, the sector that you picked, and you just like are broadly trying to see where is the signal coming from, right? Like who is reacting, who is, maybe you're just talking to people, doing some research, doing some thesis. that leap of faith, the first leap of faith, that in itself is very, very, very ambiguous, and that still needs to be taken. Then comes a phase where you have like some clarity. You know that, okay, this is the product, this is coldly, like broadly going to be the value, this is the core of what my offering is going to evolve into. But now you're working maybe on approaching an enterprise, and in there are like these different personas. Hey, I can also sell this product to the chief marketing person, also sell this to the chief revenue person, also sell this to the chief finance person. I don't know who I should be selling this to. And this becomes very critical, because again, you are in the same spot where you have to like sort of make sense based on whatever limited data you have. Maybe you have done pilots with 20 folks, and you have some data point to say that, okay, CROs are going to be like the easier win for you, but that may still not be enough. And this second leap of faith, the first one is of course scary because it's very ambiguous. The second one is even more scary because now you have like certain definitive answer, and you know that there are only so many attempts left for you as a founder. Like you can't like undo 100 things. You can undo only so many things by the time, given the fact that startups are always like having a limited and defined runway and so on. So any thoughts around that before we move on to the next thing?
Yeah, I think it's very similar, right? Like choosing the right department entry point. As long as you are thinking and you're realizing, I need to choose one, then I think you're going to be in okay shape, because most people think they don't have to choose, and they think, well, yeah, I mean, for some people I'll sell into the sales team, for some people I'll sell into the marketing team, for some people, but every single one of those changes requires a brand new positioning, a brand new set of value propositions, usually a brand new onboarding, a brand new, higher up the funnel content to get them excited. Like you're not going to generate demand for marketers in the same way that you're going to generate demand for the head of IT. They just consume different content in different channels in different ways for different reasons. And so if you are thinking, I'm trying to figure out the best way to sell into a company, you have to make another bet. For the first bet is just, what type of company do I think I want to sell into? And then the second bet is, what department do I think is going to have the best chance of me coming in? And like the loose heuristic that we would say is, who feels the pain the biggest? Who's literally on the line and is going to be fired if they can't solve this problem that your product solves? And I think a lot of people in the age of software being easy to create have created solutions that were something they dreamt up in a, it's while they're sitting daydreaming. Like, it'd be cool if I had a little productivity app that could do X, Y, and Z, and then they can spin it up in a weekend on no code. Hire someone, and then they're like, all right, I'm going out there, and in reality, none of the teams really feel any pain, and the thing they've created doesn't really solve any problem at all. So it becomes harder when it's like, well, no one cares. Well, then it's like, well, it's probably not a marketing problem. It's more of a market problem or a product problem that it doesn't. It's not. No one really cares about this thing you've created, and it doesn't really do anything. So if you have a product that solves a real painful problem, it's like, who experiences this pain the most, who will be willing to then champion the deal across all the other stakeholders? Who's going to be the one that's roping in the head of marketing and booking the meetings and, taking all these different calls and setting up intros with the executives to try to get this deal moved through? It's going to be one of those departments. It's not going to be multiple to start. And so there's going to be some experimentation, but as long as people understand that that's the reality, I think you're going to be in a lot better shape than people who think, well, it's interchangeable. I can come in through any of the doors, and I'm going to run my email sequences to all 5 of these different departments, and moving towards the specificity is better.
No, yeah, I see what you're talking to, and I agree with it. It's very practical and actionable as well. But Anthony, I want to basically shift gears here. I see your background a lot of time spent with like community in general in different roles, content, a lot of community management per se with these different church groups. How like how did Fletch PMM happen? Like what's the story there? Because it's, were you always working on positioning indirectly and Fletch PMM came in very naturally? Was there like some aha, this is a big problem area? Could you like shed some light on how's your journey been personally?
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually going to start from the end, and then I'm going to work backwards. So we were working at an agency that does custom services. So they were basically doing some combination of product development, product design, and product management. So they would work with big companies, small companies to launch new things, and any way that you can use any of those 3 disciplines either together or separate. They would provide the services. So we had been trying to figure out, is there a way that we could find a repeatable service? It wasn't always different, and it was like we could have one repeatable thing. And we tried a couple different ways to figure out what that service might be. First, we made this big video content library that was basically about like different things we thought, and we just put it out, and we were like, let's see who bites. So like that's the traditional way almost all companies grow, is they have an idea like for technology, and then they create it, and they say, who wants it? And nobody wanted it really. So that didn't work. Then we
Yeah.
took another approach. We're like, well, maybe we should just get in the market first, drum around for problems, and that in general I think is safer. But we went out, and some guys on our team had a really sophisticated way that they were booking meetings with these different executives. And so they would pick a random market. The one guy picked like headless e-commerce, like CMS, platforms, and was meeting with all these executives at all these companies. The other guy was picking like data mining, and he was meeting with all these data mining companies. So we were drumming around, and we weren't really able to figure out like exactly a repeatable service. They had different things, and they'd get on the calls and be like, well, what do you guys do? And we'd be like, what do you need? And then they were like, I don't know, you asked me. So that didn't really work either. And so the third option, we were like, I think we have to take a stab at both. You have to come in with a hypothesis on the product and the market. For us, it was on the service in the market. So we said we had been big fans of people like April Dunford, and um, we were like, what if we said let's do positioning for startups? We'll do positioning for startups, and that even there is insanely vague and broad. Like, some people would hear that and be like, "Oh my gosh!" Especially if you're in a services business and you're providing SEO and design and content. Like, you're like, "What? Just one thing? That's so narrow." But in reality, it's like, what does that even mean? And what is a startup? A 2-person company in a garage, and also a multi-thousand-person company and right about to IPO. That's the same segment. They're both startups, right? So but we went in and we took a content first approach where we were saying, let's just see if we can drum up some leads by putting out content to demonstrate our expertise. And so I randomly posted on LinkedIn as a test. I was like, and this is where a little bit of my background comes in. In all the roles I've ever been in, there's always been some element of content creation. All the way back to even out of high school when I was going to college originally, I wanted to be a teacher. And so there's a lot of content creation, teaching involved, and LinkedIn content especially really lends itself to like educational materials as helping grow an audience. So I posted something. Looking back in hindsight, it was like, what the heck was this post? But for whatever reason, the LinkedIn algorithm latches onto it, and it gets hundreds of thousands of views, hundreds and hundreds of likes, all these comments from like big name people, and then all of a sudden, I'm getting all these followers, getting all these people adding me and sending me DMs and stuff. So the next day, everyone in the company's freaking out. This is crazy. I did another post, and the second one also goes like mini viral. So probably unheard of, total fluke, not repeatable. The first 2 posts I do basically go viral, mini viral on LinkedIn, right? And then the next 100 posts don't do anything. Like, they completely bomb. But that initial success gave us the fuel to say, let's lean into LinkedIn. If we can get one post in front of 100,000, 200,000 people, we could probably figure out a way to do this more repeatedly. So my partner Rob, who now we started Fletch together, he was at the same company. He starts posting, and then we're going on this journey, and we slowly discover as we're doing positioning, we were like, well, how could we audit other people's positioning to even know how they're positioning today? So what we would do is we would look at their homepage, because it was the most public asset, and we would talk about, hey, this is unclear about the positioning. Who's this for? So we were attacking positioning from the angle of the homepage, and then eventually people just started reaching out and saying, can you help us rewrite our homepage? And we're like, oh, maybe the community approach, like the loose positioning and startups combined, start drumming up with this content. We actually were realizing that there was a need in the market, especially, and then we honed in on early stage. We realized that it was like seed to Series A where this problem was felt most acutely. It was mostly with companies that are horizontal, that serve lots of different markets. They felt it the most. And so we kept narrowing down until we kind of found our little niche and have been able to build a pretty profitable business. And so eventually we spun out of that agency because it didn't really make sense for us to all stay under the same umbrella, because they did a lot of different things. And so we spun out. We've been doing Fletch now for close to a year on our own. Gotten to work with close to 150 companies, rewriting their homepages from little itty bitty startups pre-launch all the way up to publicly traded companies, which has been super fun, very different. But all that to say, my background in working with churches, working in teaching and stuff like that, it all kind of stemmed. There was always a thread of taking things that are complicated and then helping simplify them and make them easy to understand. So it gave me a bunch of fuel to be able to infuse that into what we're doing today. And my partner, he came from traditional software startup world, so he's lived, and he basically augmented the industry experience that I didn't have as much of, not coming into software late in life. And then I augmented a lot of the content creation and teaching experience. And so the two of us together, it makes for a really good combo. And I feel like all the things that I learned over the years in church world of like teaching and things like that have definitely carried over into how we approach taking these complicated topics and then explaining them in really simple ways.
Wow. Now now it's all making sense. And I was hearing you out very patiently. And one thing that directly hit the chord was where you went and said that, hey, so we go onto these calls and we are saying that, oh, we don't know what the next step is. Like, you say what you want from us, right? Like, and they are saying, oh, you booked a call, you say what you want from us. I say that because, again, like, a lot of founders go through that themselves. And here I want to just touch briefly on what in your experience differs when you're going with an agency pitch. What I mean by an agency pitch is you're going and saying, hey, we do service around marketing, we do service around uh, I don't know, it could be branding. We do service around running ads for you. Now, customers will have very custom requests, right? Like, and to some extent, as an agency that's willing to do professional service, you somewhere have to do some sort of laundry cleaning, as in like the tasks that you'd not probably list down on your website. Maybe they expect you to do something because their first step itself is broken and so on, as opposed to like selling a product where it's very, very, very fixed. Like, there are these products that have a PLG, like product led motion in them. And for them, it's like you can just go swipe your card, enter a few details, you're good to get started with. Like, there's a templatized flow, right? Like, so how does it change as far as positioning goes when I'm a founder and I'm trying to pitch something as a service as opposed to pitch something as a product?
Yeah. So in general, even with companies where the product is very fixed, there's a million different ways they can sell it. And there's a million different use cases that even a simple product can be applied to. Because if take anything, right? Say it's a project management tool. Well, what types of projects? Are they solo projects? Are they team projects? Are they industry specific? Do they need to integrate with certain sorts of tools and approaches that maybe someone else wouldn't need to integrate with? And so all these software, because software is actually very flexible, right? You can change it pretty quickly, especially these days. So
Yeah.
when we see people trying to pitch the product like it's a service where it can be bent into a bunch of different ways, I think that's where founders get into trouble. And it really only makes sense to do that if you've chosen a target segment. So back to that book that I was talking about earlier called Crossing the Chasm. The way that a startup can gain an upper hand on a market leader who's 1,000 times their size is by creating a very bespoke custom solution for one target segment. So like if you think, okay, well, we're going to service, I don't know, tiny mom and pop grocery stores. Well, what are the needs of the mom and pop grocery store? Let's take our software and let's actually add on all the things that mom and pop grocery store would need. And it's pretty likely that the other mom and pop grocery stores will need it too. So the difference between the agency model, true agency model, is like we service any type of customer who needs any of these
Mhm.
services, which is just gets you into trouble. That just makes it so you're not ever going to really be repeatable. The margins are going to be terrible, all sorts of stuff. But besides that, when you do that with software and you take on all these different projects for different segments, it really pulls the product in 1,000 different directions, pulls the company in all these different directions, because the mom and pop grocery stores, they're going to have way different needs than the corporate businesses over here, than the therapist offices over here, than the whatever it is, right? So in general, you can do more bespoke, really flesh out like an agency would, as long as you've chosen one specific segment, because then the work isn't going to be wasted. It's actually going to be repeatable. And the other mom and pop grocery stores that talk to each other, they're going to be like, hey, we just adopted this new software and they did this stuff that integrated with our checkout system. And then the other grocery stores were like, well, could we get that too? And they're like, yeah, you should talk to them. And now you have repeatability and you have word of mouth. So you can do the larger custom stuff as long as you put the constraints. And then that often is the reason that a small startup gains the upper hand on a big incumbent, because the big incumbent's like, well, I'm not going to waste the time building on all these little integrations for the mom and pop stores. It's not a big enough segment. We're a multi-billion-dollar company. We don't care. You know what I mean? Like, we're doing great. Where the startup says, what if we just owned this specific segment and we'll build out all the things they need, and then we'll use the success there to layer on adjacent markets. And then all of a sudden they've gone from a tiny little thing helping really, really nail one market segment to now they're actually catching up to the market leader and they're becoming this giant thing, right? And you've seen this play out all the time. Salesforce was the main CRM. They started with S&B companies, and they were taking on these giant on-premises CRM companies. They moved into the cloud, and they did the same thing. They were targeting S&Bs first and then gaining an upper hand. And now HubSpot's kind of doing it to Salesforce. And Salesforce is, they're the enterprise ones now, and HubSpot's coming in from the S&B, and they're carving away more and more stuff from Salesforce. And so it's like the point of entry, right? Like the D-Day analogy, World War II. They had to land at the beaches of Normandy in order to get into Germany. They couldn't try to take all of them at the same time.
But when you say uh, it's okay to go the service route when you have identified a segment, what do you mean by a segment? Like, how granular are you talking? Are you talking a particular vertical and a particular persona? Are you saying a particular industry niche persona is okay if it's open ended? Of course, like narrower it is, the better it is. But in general, have you seen patterns around what works or what's like borderline bad?
Yeah, I think there's some like loose napkin math metrics you can be thinking. Like, let's say you're doing 5 million in revenue. Can you add on another 5 million from one single
Hmm.
segment? And that segment being ideally a specific industry, a specific department, and a specific use case, probably in a specific
Yeah,
geographical area. Maybe it's the US, right? And the
yeah,
reason is because you want the word of mouth to spread. And so you're looking for essentially to be able to become a dominant market leader in this segment. But the segment has to be a real segment, right? It has to be defined. It has to be people would actually call themselves. You can't create the segment. So like, that book 0 to 1 that a lot of people have read. I think it was in this book where he's like, if you say, we're a restaurant and we sell Mexican food, Chinese food, and Ethiopian food, we're going to dominate that market, right? We're the only game. And it's like, well, just no one is looking for that. That's not a real thing, right? There's no market for the combination of those three foods. So it has to be a real segment, right? And so some examples, things like colleges, right? Like colleges are a great example. That's a smaller subsegment. Like you can think of, I think it was Tinder. The way that Tinder initially got enough people to get off the ground, the dating app, is they went to each sorority and they would find the most popular girl in the sorority, and
yeah.
they basically said, "We'll sponsor a huge birthday party for you. We'll pay for everything, and the only caveat that we'll do this for free is you say everyone who comes has to download the Tinder app." And so they did it at a sorority, and so everyone comes to the party of the popular girl. They all come in, they download the app, and then in the morning they go in and they're opening it. And they're like, "Oh my gosh, it has all the people I met last night. Here they're in the dating," and they were able to do that. They just copy that sorority to sorority, 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 sorority across the country. And so all of a sudden you had this giant user base from this tiny segment, like just sororities and universities. When Tinder knew they wanted to be the global player of dating and stuff like that, but they needed to get the early momentum to get the ball rolling, right? Facebook, the same deal, started in Harvard, then it went to like elite colleges, then it was all colleges, then it was high school, then it was like everyone in the US, then
Yeah.
they started layering on extra countries. So this sequencing of market segments is a very tried and true playbook, because it's really hard to just go after $1 billion market all at once when you have 5 people and $1 million in VC money.
Yeah, but I think it's also like equally easy to probably also get lost. So if service is working for you and your original attempt was to like productize it, maybe it's a good idea to check in once in a while saying, hey, have we gone too broad
Yep.
to not be able to package it in the form of a product? I've seen like products go down that route. So that's that. But interesting. So Anthony, again, let's switch gears. So we talked about what in general positioning is. We talked about how your background led, and then we just went on to ramble around what agency versus a product model looks like. But today, lately, for the last couple of months, 3 months, I've been spending a lot of time on the ground talking to these leaders of established companies, right? Like wherein there is a general sense, and they would not ever admit it on record, but all of these leaders that are in established massive incumbents, let's say they are not SaaS, they are non-digitally native companies, retail players, insure tech players who are not tech first, uh, real estate big moguls of the world. There is this sense of being left behind, right? Like, and I was talking to a bunch of founders who have the same target market more or less. Now the problem is that these founders go and then use a term. So if someone is building an AI, they would go in and say, oh, we are doing a GPT for X, or we are doing a chatbot for X. And the minute this word is uttered, the world has sort of worked against them, because these leaders in these like big companies, while they feel that there needs to be a change, or while they feel that they're left behind, they've also seen really bad examples of GPT for X, right? Like where there was a tall promise that was made and the product didn't deliver. So a lot of these founders in general feel that, hey, we don't know what is the right way to navigate that market. The minute I go in and utter my first word, they have already made assumptions. So, oh, you're going to do a text to SQL, you're going to do a prompt to image, something like that, right? Like, and what would you say to these founders who are figuring out how to better knock on that door, how to like grab an attention of someone who maybe is psychologically thinking that yes, it's time to change, who's maybe also feeling left behind, but is also in general very wary of time, like a traditional organization. And pick anyone for that matter. Like I'm sure if you go to Macy's today or Johnson and Johnson and you go in and say, hey, I need like 20 hours from different folks in your team, different stakeholders, before I can like deploy the first version of the product for you, they're going to be very, very, very calculative, like whether it even makes sense for them or not. So how should these founders who are building, let's say, something which is now very common, even if the tech is different, they're building something in AI and trying to sell to the same enterprise, how should they approach their whole pitch, whole positioning, whole journey better?
I'm going to borrow an example outside of tech, to
Yeah.
make this point. When you, let's say 40 years ago, if you wanted to become a famous rock band, you needed to have 5 members who all learned an instrument, got really good, wrote good songs, and then you needed money to book studio time. You needed to somehow figure out how you were going to market yourself, which usually just looked like pitching yourselves to the labels that had all the marketing dollars. And if you couldn't, there's like 10 barriers to entry there, right? Like the talent itself, the songwriting itself, the recording, the image, like getting professional photography taken of the band because there wasn't smartphones back then. So it was a hard barrier to entry, and then you had to pitch yourselves to these labels, and they would only take a couple, and only a couple that they took actually made it into the mainstream. So over time, technology made all those things much easier. It reduced the barrier to entry for all these things. All of a sudden, you could make a song in your bedroom on your laptop without even really knowing how to do music. You could just pull
Yeah.
pre-built samples and things like that, layer them in, and you could buy a microphone that used to cost thousands of dollars. Now it's $50 on Amazon. It can get shipped to your house. You have TikTok in your pocket where you can film yourself on the cell phone camera that you already have. No lighting, no professional, anything needed, and it'll promote you out to the world, and you can get all these fans. You don't even necessarily need the label. You can post your stuff directly on Spotify. People can just find it. You don't need to be played on the radio. Like anyone can discover you in all these ways. Amazing time for musicians. The flip side, because it became so easy to do, it has generated an infinite amount of competition. And so paradoxically, there still is only a few people who make it through at the end to the mainstream, even though you have all these people at the bottom. So like in the old days, you only had a couple people on the radio. In the new days, there still really is only a couple of the big ones who have made it through because now the competition is endless. You used to compete with just the other big bands. Now there's millions and tens of millions of people who are making music and releasing it every day from their bedroom and competing on those same TikTok channels and Spotify playlists. And so at the same time, there's all this competition. And I see it as a perfect parallel for something like ChatGPT and the OpenAI API that you can just put under your product. It's going to be, if you truly are a ChatGPT rapper, it's the same thing as if you're just posting music on on TikTok, and why am I not becoming famous? Well, there's millions of other people doing it. When OpenAI released the capabilities of LLMs to the world, everyone got them, right? Like everyone was like, this is going to give startups the upper hand. And it's like all the big companies got it too. Everyone has it. Like, so the technology was democratized. So the only companies that are going to be able to make this work are the ones who really, really deliver a 10x better experience for a specific customer segment, because anyone can deliver a generic AI experience. OpenAI is doing it for the whole world right now. And so it's not going to be enough to do a clever wrapper with a nice UI to get you off the ground. It's going to be like, I'm picking a very, very niche industry focused use case. We're doing ChatGPT analysis for dialysis machines, in healthcare companies, and we're doing it to solve these very specific, like those people and the data sets that if they can get their hands on them, that's the only LLM companies that will be able to survive and cut through the clutter of millions and millions of these wrappers that you can build in a weekend. And the people on LinkedIn didn't really help anyone by posting every single day, you should build your AI company and launch it this weekend, right? Like it's the same thing. Anytime there's like a get rich quick scheme, drop shipping for a while was a big thing on Amazon. This is just the latest form because you can get a lot of clicks by saying, build your, ChatGPT startup today and make $1 million. Like, it's like, no, that's not how it works. In the same way that these musicians, just being able to record a song in your house does not mean that you're going to be the next Taylor Swift, right? To really do it well, it's going to be like, we're going to own this specific problem space. So I think that the LLM based companies would do well to verticalize and say, we're going to focus on specific industries, because by focusing on industries, you're creating artificial barriers to entry for the other startups. Because who's going to take the time to learn all the ins and out of the dialysis, sub industry of healthcare? The only people who are going to take all that time to learn that industry are going to be the ones who win. And everyone else, like, I don't want to learn all that stuff. I'm looking for my get rich quick thing. I'm making a ChatGPT wrapper for, scheduling meetings or something. And it's like, it's not going to work.
I love the analogy with the music band and how you just closed all of it. But I want to go through a scenario here now. So let's say I'm not building a thin wrapper. Let's say I have my vertical identified, I have my persona identified, like I have my use case identified. I go to a really big company. Let's say I go to McDonald's and I go and say, hey, McDonald's, here's what I built. Now, McDonald's looks at it, goes and says, huh, interesting. But you know what? Like, if you add these two use cases extra, I'm going to pay you 1 million more, as opposed to like paying you 500,000. I'm going to pay you like 1.5 million a year. Now, for a startup, which is come to a conclusion based on like a lot of observation, a lot of research, some hunch as well, or let's say not hunch, but hunch is not the right word, like it doesn't do justice. But let's say there is a broader conviction in the founder that this is the right market to go for, the right vertical to go for. Would you say that at that point in time, saying yes to solving those two extra use cases for McDonald's might be a distraction if the company is not like something that has hit 20 million in ARR? We're still like talking about, oh, so these are like the third 3 million, 4 million in ARR. You're still you're finding your footing. You're still trying to like create your own name. And you go into this room and someone offers you 1 million more, which is substantial because that's like big enough of a number for me if my ARR is 4, but then it doesn't align with all the beliefs. Like it doesn't happen very intuitively. Like founders are tempted to say yes to those use cases. What's your take there? And I say this because I'm sure you have seen companies go through this journey, and some which probably didn't get much out of it, some who still managed to survive. So yeah, your take there would be helpful.
I think if the startup doesn't really have a really, really well known customer, then I would say I would take the project. I would not take multiples of those projects. Like in the early days of Salesforce, they had Merrill Lynch, the giant financial services company, took them on and said, we're going to put you in all of our, across all of our branches and everything. So that you need that initial customer to help get credibility. But I would not try to build the business on recreating that set of use cases for McDonald's for other companies, because it's likely that other companies are not going to want the same set of use cases. You'd be more thinking, okay, well, of the 10 that we delivered for McDonald's, which one of the 10 might be a repeatable thing that we could start with? And we've already built it, and we've got the credibility because we can put the McDonald's logo on our website and we can bring it up in case studies, and people say, oh, well, if they work with McDonald's, they must not be too risky of a startup. And then I would start to really hone down and go more specific to maybe one use case that I think is going to be repeatable to help me get to that product market fit level. So I think it's a question. If you already have some really big logos and someone's offering you more money, then I would say it is a distraction. I would say keep looking for the repeatability thing. But if you haven't had that initial success, I would take it. And I mean that 1.5 million probably
No, yeah,
go a long way with your runway, right, to keep you alive for maybe the year or two more
yeah,
that you
no,
need.
100%, 100%, awesome. Anthony, I'm very curious. We've been talking about AI for a while. There are a bunch of folks who also use AI for all types of content. So they go in and ask ChatGPT to define the landing page for them, or whatever. Have you seen any good implementation as such, or are these like just really poorly executed, or are we not there yet? Like what I'm coming to is, what do you think of, let's say, leveraging an LLM to? I just brainstorm with ChatGPT, keep chatting with it for a day, give it like very elaborate prompts, and go in and say, hey, help me identify my positioning. Have you seen that work?
Yeah, so for content creation, I use ChatGPT for a lot of my stuff, but it's not.
Of
I'm
course.
using it more to say. So, for example, I'm going to write a post about this concept of the technology adoption lifecycle curve, where you have early adopters, and then you have you keep going. You have the early majority, you have the late majority, you have the laggards. Like you've seen, it's the bell curve. And my argument is going to be that product market fit happens like 5 times. It happens first with these technology enthusiasts who are tinkering people, like engineer types who just think that technology is great. That's your first product market fit, but that's not going to get you the money that you want. The next one, right, might be these visionaries, and so what I'm going to do is I already have the concept in my head of how I want to arrange it, and I'm going to say there you can find product market fit multiple times, and it looks very different the result. And I'm going to probably ask ChatGPT, who do you think are good examples of companies that currently would be in each of those sections, right? What's an example company that would be that have early adopter product market fit? What would be like early majority? And ChatGPT will probably spit out a pretty good answer, and I'll just take that and incorporate it into the post. So anytime there's like research stuff like that, I'll use ChatGPT to do it. But I didn't ask ChatGPT, come up with a post for me, write the post for me, come up with the content. I'll use it to supplement my knowledge that I'm bringing to be able to write the better posts. So there's also some cool ideas. Like we know a guy who's working on a ChatGPT style content related product, and he's saying, and I haven't seen it yet, but he's claiming you could feed it a post that you're going to do on LinkedIn, and it will tell you essentially how many impressions and likes and comments it'll get based on all this
Yeah.
pattern matching. So I'm stoked about that idea because what I can do is we always just write the post and then we're like, okay, hopefully it goes viral, and then we post it. But if I could put it in someone else's system and it's like, this is only going to get 5,000 impressions, I'm like, oh shoot, I got to rework it. So like stuff like that, I think is really cool and unique, and like I would use it in my workflow every day. But yeah, like wholesale, like using ChatGPT for positioning and stuff like that. Like I think it's the same problem as always. The templates are only as good as what you fill in the blanks with. So if you say like you can see a million positioning templates and homepage templates that say write the problem you solve, there's the that is the great question, right? Which problem do I talk about at what level of specificity, what level of altitude? Because the problem I explained to my investors is going to look way different than the CEO that I'm trying to sell to versus the end user versus the director. And so like I don't think we're quite there yet where it could just replace all that
Got
hard
it.
work that you have to do on the ground. But I think it's a very powerful subsequent like supplementary tool that you can use across all these different parts. And as someone, I'm in there 20 times a day, right? I'm asking questions all day. So I am a very big believer, big adopter of AI. I don't trust it with those key core things yet, and I don't know if I ever will.
Awesome. Awesome. Anthony, we are unfortunately nearing the end of our recording. I wish we could chat for longer, but on a closing note, do you have any learning that you would like to share with our audience real quick? And where can people reach out to you if they wanted to?
Yeah, I think if anyone wanted to connect, I think the most learnings that we have, we share pretty much daily. Me and my partner, his name's Rob Kaminsky. We both share posts on LinkedIn almost every day. You know, we try to maybe 4 times a week if it's a busier week. We're not able to do every day. So if you're like, I wanted to dive more into messaging, positioning, how it relates to go to market, and all sorts of stuff like that, I think our LinkedIn content would be your first best bet. And then feel free if you want to chat with us. You know, send us a connect request, shoot us a DM. We pretty much accept everyone, and we're happy to chat. We're pretty open and reachable. When you comment on our post, we try to comment back to everybody. So yeah, looking forward to meeting anyone who comes from this podcast.
Any learning that you have had that you would like to share with us?
I mean, beyond, I feel like I've been talking your ear off. Beyond all this the stuff I've been sharing, nothing jumps to mind. But yeah, I think everything up to this point, I think is that's been my latest stuff that's on my mind.
It was lovely. It was lovely chatting with you, Anthony. And I like how we were just super fluid, hopping between ideas. I have a ton of questions that I originally had planned on asking, but better to do like a few in more elaborate fashion than like just hover over a lot of them. It was a pleasure hosting you, Anthony. Thank you so much. I thoroughly enjoyed our chat.
Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. And folks, if you're listening in, we have many more new episodes coming in. Please let us know what you think of this episode. We're going to drop all the links in the description for you to like follow Anthony, go look at the work that Fletch PMM is doing, all of the things that we talked about, some popular concepts as well. And we have some new episodes coming as well. So if you have a guest in mind, please do comment. Let us know who you would want to see. We'll see you back in the next episode. Thank you and bye bye.